And good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 14, 2014 Board of Education meeting. I'd like to start off the meeting by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the formal agenda is action on 3 sets of minutes, June 9 regular meeting, June 10 executive session, June 23 executive session, and June 23 workshop. I think really on the 2 executive sessions, which I think related to a student expulsion hearing, really only the people that were at that meeting should vote on that. The 3.1 and 3.4 would be the regular board meeting. So is there a motion to approve the items 3.1 and 3.4, the June 9 and June 23 board meetings?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any corrections, changes, additions?
I did just have one question. On page the June 9th minutes, page 3, 7.1, is this second sentence accurate? A panel to conduct the interviews of the candidates for a Baldwin position is being established, because we kind of approved that candidate 2 or 3 weeks later. Had that committee not already been working hard?
I think that is accurate.
Okay.
Yep, the committee was...
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
And I had one question/clarification too. On page 4, item 7.5, regarding the cost of the study to be conducted by Dr. Borland, the minutes say approximately $20,000, and the proposal was a little less than 10, not including expenses. So I didn't know if I couldn't remember if the 20 was what we discussed or not. I didn't think it was that much.
I believe at the meeting I was unclear as to whether or not expenses were included, and so we suggested 20 in case there was the $10,000 roughly contract cost, and then expenses for travel, boarding, and
that's high.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
It will not go that high.
Okay. Any other changes, clarifications? All in favor then of the action on those 2 minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, and then Mr. Sands, I know you were at the 2 expulsion hearings, so if you would move to approve those.
I would so move, Mr. Chairman.
And the third was Dr. I'm sorry, was it Dr. Moore or Mr. Kazin?
Were those the June expulsions? Yes.
The 2 expulsions, that was you, right? Yeah, okay. And if you would second those, please.
Sorry.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? It should reflect me voting aye as well, please. Okay. Expenditures for the month of June, we did spend quite a bit of time talking about that in the business meeting, but Mrs. Dudley, if you could just summarize where we are.
I will give an abbreviated version. Expenditures for the month of June are $8,103,951, which is 97% of the budget. We will be discussing unexpended and encumbered funds later in the meeting, so I won't go into that. Just that most of the others are pretty much on target as far as expenditures, with salaries, employee benefits, purchased services, tuition. There doesn't seem to be anything that is out of the ordinary or different that needs to be talked about. We spent a lot of time going through the warrants in the prior meeting, and all questions were covered, and so that's the expenditures for the month of June.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts based on what happened at the business operations meeting? And is that a motion to approve the expenditures?
It is a motion to
right.
approve those expenditures.
All right. And is there a second? Second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are running out of the schedule for review of the expenditures. The next month, Mrs. Renner, you're
Yes.
scheduled for August, and then we are open as of September. So if I can pass this around and people can take a month or 2, and then we can try to fill up the next year. Item 5 on the agenda is public forum for topics on the board agenda. Anybody want to be heard now? All right. Item 6 on the agenda is student representatives. There are none, but we will have new reps in September.
Probably for the October meeting.
Okay, all right. Then you want to go into superintendent's report?
Happy to, thank you. Hiring is in full swing as we are about halfway through the summer. At this point, we had 3 administrative and director positions as we went into the summer. The board is aware that we have filled 2. Both of our principal positions have been filled. Mr. Grimm and Mr. Hamill both begin officially on August 1st. We continue to have 1 vacancy for our dining service director. That position is still open. Mr. Bowden is beginning interviews for that position. We began the summer with 25 teacher vacancies. This included the increased positions that were associated with full-day kindergarten, as well as a number of retirements and vacancies for other reasons. At this point, we have confirmed and filled 11 of those positions. 14 remain vacant. I will suggest, however, that many of the building-based hiring committees have completed their work, and there are recommendations who are moving their way through the pipeline. I have several meetings scheduled to meet with recommended teachers for positions next week, and we'll continue to assign teachers to those positions. I'll note that those are 25 individual positions. It's actually a total of only 22.6 FTEs. In the para positions, we likewise have 17 positions that were open at the beginning of the summer. It actually represents only 14 FTEs. Among those positions are the 6 part-time paras that were created in relationship to full-day kindergarten. At this time, 13 of those positions have been filled. There are 4 that are being completed. There were 2 clerical positions open at the beginning of the summer. 1 has been filled, and there's 1 yet to be filled. This keeps us on track for another very busy summer of hiring, but it does not top last year's record-setting hires. The HR office has been very busy. The building level committees have been very busy, and I will say that I have been pleased and impressed with the quality of candidates that are being sent forward through my office. You do have, I believe, 4 of those on your agenda tonight for your approval. Dr. Moore?
Could you comment on the middle school math coordinator position?
One of the teaching positions that remains vacant is for the middle school math coach position that was created. Dr. Keene ran a committee and did thorough work. We made an offer, and that offer was not accepted. So we have re-advertised, and we're going back out to look for the position. I will note here that this is one of those positions, like all, but a particularly important position where we will refuse to compromise. If we do not find the right person, we will continue looking into this school year. This is an important position. It is a difficult position. We're not simply looking for a talented teacher. We're looking for somebody who is a talented teacher and an experienced staff developer. We will support and grow that position, but leading adults in their professional development can be different and can at times be much more challenging than leading students in a classroom, and so we want to make sure we find the right person for this position. We will keep you abreast. That's where we are.
Any other questions on that, or comments, thoughts? We are also looking for a food service director?
Yes, yeah, we'll begin the search. We've advertised. We are screening applications. Mr. Bowden will begin the committee work on that next week, most likely. Okay. Scheduling the committee for that. We have had conversations with Dr. Borland. Dr. Borland provided a proposal to do a study of the way in which we support high-achieving students in the school system. His application, his proposal came out of Teachers College and Columbia University. We have signed the contract with Dr. Borland. I have had conversations with him, and he is scheduled for his first day in the district on the 28th of this month. He will be coming in to begin looking at documentation in the offices. We're going to work to have him maybe meet with a few principals as well as central office staff, and we will begin building his calendar for the focus groups. He will intend to meet with staff members, teachers, principals, community members. So we will be having our initial meeting and putting together his calendar and getting information out about that study. We're excited to begin our work with Dr. Borland.
And can you, when maybe you probably haven't come to this point yet, but in terms of how people are going to be selected to participate in the focus groups, can you just let us know how that's going to happen when it's decided, what teachers are going to be involved and how are they selected, what community members will be involved and how are they selected? Is there It'd
Absolutely.
be interesting to know what his thought is on that.
And rather than speaking for him, I'll meet with Dr. Borland. I'll be able to answer that question for you at your August meeting, in which ways that he prefers to have that done.
And his plan to have a report is by
He
when?
expects to have a report to us, I believe, by December. So within the teeth of budget season.
Right.
Along that vein of communication, could I just request that it kind of be on the website in a place where people can access to see the process and to know what dates are available, and maybe even just a brief description of, what's going on and who he is and that he's coming, just so if people want to go look at that, they can understand what's going on.
Yep. We can put something out that sort of gives a preview of what is to come, and then we can continue to add detail to that as detail is developed.
Okay.
At our last meeting, we had some conversation about continuing our conversation in the district around the Common Core state standards. We talked quite a bit about the last forum that was held, and there were suggestions that there needs to be follow-up to that forum. I believe you received in your materials, in your folder this evening, what we have done is we have put together a calendar of how we would like to continue that conversation. And including some of tonight's agenda items, what you have are 10 events that we have scheduled that stretch from this evening through January of this calendar year. We suggest that in August, we will put together, and we will take advantage of GCTV to do this, we'll put together another presentation on the facts, the history, the context around Common Core state standards, the stand and deliver component of the conversation, if you will, so that that can be recorded, so that that can be played on GCTV, and so that we can link to that through our website. We thought that it would be best to use August to get that work done. As we return to the schools, as we talk in our summer retreats with building level principals, the building principals in September will be hosting back-to-school nights. Teachers, parents will be returning to the schools, and each principal will be speaking to this in their individual setting at back-to-school night. And then what we want to do is we want to host essentially a listening opportunity in each of the 7 schools. And those are scheduled to fall out from October through December, where we will have the principal from each building, a teacher from each building, and a representative of central office administration at each building to listen to the communities. These are not exclusive to the individual neighborhoods. If there's a community member who can't attend their home school meeting, they're welcome to attend any other meeting. But we thought about this long and hard and decided that one opportunity for community members to comment is simply not enough. And one evening to expect people to make it out is simply not flexible enough. So we will have a number of meetings. We anticipate these being table conversations. We anticipate charting the conversations, the wonders, the questions, the I need to know more about comments, as well as the concerns. And we will collect all of that information and use that to help shape our work in the district as we move forward. Following that, we want to have conversations as we move into the second half of the year, and Smarter Balanced assessments will become a requirement. Smarter Balance will not be in field test this year. It will be the first official administration of Smarter Balance, so that as we move into the second part of the school year, being able to host more conversations about that work and what that means for parents, for families, and for students moving forward. There is obviously not a specific date for each of these identified yet. We'll be working with each building principal to set the best date for their location. Building principals and teachers will be part of each of those local conversations. And if I took anything away from our last meeting, it was that we need to work harder to listen better. And these meetings will be set up to be more listening rather than presenting. The GCTV format will be used for the presentation component, and that is something that people can go to at their convenience. There's a lot of information that needs to get out, and I think by separating those two functions of communication, we will, I hope, have better communication moving forward.
Is it possible to have the GCTV broadcast go on at the same time as a listening session? I feel like having a listening session with parents all the way in October, after having heard
Yes.
some concern from the amount of concern at from the last forum is pushing it far out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I didn't understand what you're saying. I think I
So at
do
the
now.
last meeting, we heard from parents that didn't feel like what we had for the forum was what they would want or expected. And so I'm concerned with pushing out what people are asking for into October and November is too far. So if you're going to do a broadcast on GCTV, couldn't that happen sort of at the same time, since that doesn't require parents to go out to something, you know? I mean, I realize we're getting close to August, but it seems waiting till October and November is a while.
The GCTV broadcast can continue to broadcast. They won't broadcast it, but we can continue, so that remains out. Pushing the calendar forward and trying to have something happen sooner rather than later, sure, we can work to achieve that. What we were trying to do is look at the evening calendars in September. You've got teachers out already. You've got administrators out already. You've got parents who have obligations into those. So we're trying to have it be a conversation in a way that made sense over time. Yes, if the board feels that we need to move more quickly than the calendar that we've put in front of you, that's something that we'll make every effort to do.
Just to add on to that, one of the things we wanted to do at the GCTV would be to advertise specific dates,
Right.
so that all the parents can hear the exact dates and can put them on their calendar, and then really capitalize on all the back-to-school nights in all 7 buildings in September, because parents always come out, well, a good number of parents come out for those, and really use that opportunity to try to get as much information as well as the schedule out, so we can really advertise and we can have a really good turnout on all these. So that's part of the rationale. We really can't give dates right now until we get with the administrators, and including 2 new principals. So we plan on getting those dates firmed up in our summer retreat in August, and then immediately get it out to the public and get a calendar out and brochures out. I mean, we know we can't communicate enough, but those are some of the things behind that. But we will continue to air those things and look for other ways of communication.
If it means adding an early September date that is simply an additional listening evening that is maybe only hosted by Dr. Keene and myself, then that is something that is easy enough to pull off.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I see one middle school night, so is it a combination then? So we're going to do 6 schools technically?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, the thought was to
But we
combine
wanna
them.
I just want to be able to respond correctly if someone has a question.
Right.
Okay.
In all 7 buildings, we're going to advertise and use the back-to-school nights, but because some of the things might be specific, some of the issues are specific to elementary parents, and some are specific to middle school parents. So even though an elementary parent might want to come to a middle school session, that's fine, but knowing that some of the issues will be more around the middle grades, and the high school issues will be around the high school. Instead of just saying, okay, this is a conglomeration of K through 12, and some parents are really, really concerned about kindergarten or what's going on in, 2nd or 3rd grade, and the high school parent might be more interested in what's going on in their technology class.
We do anticipate parents going to multiple evenings. Obviously, there are people who have kids in different grade levels. And at the forum, we did notice that there was a swing. At one moment, Mr. Cooksey was talking about instruction at the high school level, and then we were talking about students in 2nd grade. And so this will give more of a focus to the evening. But I do anticipate parents, a significant number of parents, having interests that cross over grade levels, and this gives the opportunity to have a more focused evening, and people can be at more than one event if they choose to be.
Well, it's coming up in the next survey, or the next agenda item, but the possibility of a survey, maybe that could work as a tool in the in-between time of the GCTV and the parent listening nights to sort of gather some data?
I have more information to share on that. Yep, if we're ready to move on, I'm comfortable doing that.
We might want to come back to this, but why don't you brought it up, so why don't we talk about that, and then I maybe have a couple of thoughts about meetings.
Sure. So additionally, at a recent meeting, the suggestion was raised that we conduct a survey that would go ahead and collect perceptions, opinions, data around the work that we have done over the last several years, and particularly this past year with Common Core state standards. So following that meeting, I reached out to CAPS, the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, wanting to know if anybody had a tool that they had used that they had found particularly effective. No need to design our old tool if something effective existed. And at this point, I found no positive responses. I didn't find anybody who has done such a poll in their community. I spoke with Joe Cirasulo, the director of CAPS. I talked with him about using some of the lobbyists that we have available to us through CAPS, people who have some political polling experience to help shape that, and didn't find any responses there. A later agenda item, I want to talk with you about the Suburban School Superintendents Network. We are not officially a member of that network yet, but since I had the email list, I sent out a query to that group. So this was 150 suburban high-achieving school districts across the country, and asked if anybody had conducted such a poll and gotten positive results, actionable data and information, and could we build on the work that those folks had done. Again, many people reported that they had not conducted such a poll. There was concern about the complexity of the question. However, I had 2 references that came back for organizations that have done this kind of work. Earlier today, I was able to have a conversation with Rod White of Unicom. Unicom is a professional public relations firm. They have done significant public polling. They have a deep background and history doing public polling, particularly around educational concerns. They've done work with Amherst Public Schools in Massachusetts. They've done work with Bedford Public Schools in New York. They were recommended to me through the superintendents associated with those districts. Speaking with Rod today, he was excited about the idea of discussing how to move forward. I've asked him to put together a proposal for us, and I appreciated his thoughts. We have looked at a draft. I've looked at some roughed out questions to try to get to parent satisfaction, to try to get to the heart of instructional concerns here in the system, and to be careful about confusing or muddying the questions by getting into what continues to, I think, be challenging definitions around the Common Core state standards. I know that many people continue to conflate Common Core state standards, teacher evaluation, student assessment, educational reform writ large. There continue to be commentators, both local, state, and national, who comment on educational reform, and I think it makes it difficult for teachers in our classrooms and for communities to be able to parse out separate components of that educational reform. What Mr. Wright talked about was first, his first step in this work would be coming to Guilford, meeting with us, meeting with representatives of the community, and helping us to identify the questions that we want to ask. What specifically, what do we want to ask? What do we want to know? And how will that information be actionable? How do you phrase the questions in a way that you get data back, that you get information back that you can actually work from? So the first thing that he would do is come here and work with us to shape the questions well. They would then help us in actual construction of a survey document, and they would then be involved in the actual administration of the survey, starting first with a phone survey that would be conducted so that you got a true random sample. When we conduct surveys locally, what we tend to do is put the survey out and invite everybody to participate. And what that does is it generates a self-selected sample for us. Only the people who choose to respond become part of the sample. What Unicom would do is conduct first a targeted telephone survey where we got a true random sampling of the community. When that was completed and when that survey was done, the exact same survey tool would then be sent out with an invitation. And when they disaggregate the data, they look at it twice. They look at the self-selected survey response, they look at the randomized survey response, and they identify if there's any differences. He told me that in his experience, the responses often track very closely, but it's a control to make sure that you're getting real randomized response to the survey. I've asked him to put together a proposal. I've asked him if he'd be interested in looking at the drafts that we have begun working on in district. He expressed an interest in both. I expect to have more conversations with him moving forward, and it's something that we'll continue to, I think about and work on moving forward. I think, Amy, tying it to the idea of continuing the conversation is important so that we're collecting information from face-to-face conversations in the community, as well as thinking about how best to use a tool. His challenge to me about what do you really want to ask, what do you want to know, and how will you use the data is exciting to me, because we're going to have people who have some expertise in doing this work helping us create questions that'll move us in a positive direction.
What's the timeline for instance, if he was going to do something like that, what's the timeline?
I asked exactly that question, and he said all of it will take probably in the ballpark of 6 to 8 weeks to do it well. And he expects to have a proposal to me, I believe, by the end of this week. So you're
How much will
talking
that
about,
cost us?
you're talking about early in the school year at this point.
How much?
I have no idea. We did not discuss money. I want to see it in a proposal before I asked him over the phone, just to put a finger in the air. I think at times, if you ask somebody to commit to that on the phone in a conversation, you end up getting not the answer you want. So giving him the time to put it on a proposal, I didn't want him to float something while I was driving. He is going to put together a formal proposal and have that to me, I hope, by the end of this week.
So, we did a survey, the climate survey, and to my knowledge, we didn't really go through anywhere near that level of, so why was that? I mean, why should we,
Bullying legislation, as well as the new teacher evaluation, both require that schools conduct annual surveys. One was initially intended to be about student perceptions, community perceptions about bullying in the schools. The teacher evaluation plan requires that you conduct surveys and that you get parent feedback to the school. In both of those cases, models and templates were made available by the state. So the climate survey that we conducted now for 2 years around safety in the schools was built on the state template that was prepared. The survey that we have now blended into that to include questions that will help to feed our teacher and administrator evaluation plans also came from those state templates that were provided. What we simply did was try to blend the two to help avoid survey fatigue. We didn't want to send out surveys at the end of the year, one about school climate for bullying legislation and one about school climate and effectiveness and teacher and administrator effectiveness for evaluation. There was, in fact, a lot of redundancies, so we simply combined the state templates and have collected that information. This is year 2 that we have collected that. In this year's administration, the raw data has just been compiled and arrived on my desk, and as I unpack that with principals over these next 2 weeks, we will prepare to share that with the board and the community as well.
Well, then there is, I take it the other half of the answer is there is no state template.
Yeah, not only is there no state template, I can't find anybody else who has done a survey about perceptions around Common Core state standard. There was no district in the state that shared, so it's not having those tools, not having something as a model, and being a little concerned. I know enough about surveys to know that I don't know enough about surveys to do one well when it's about a fairly complex and sophisticated question. We've used surveys, I think, really effectively when we've asked, how would you best like to be contacted on snow delays or closings? We did a survey that asked about satisfaction with the calendar when February break was removed and what perceptions were. Would you like to see it returned, or did you like having it out? I think when the question is direct and black and white, School Messenger and SurveyMonkey and our local talent serves us well. This, to me, seems like a more complicated issue. I wanted to take advantage of somebody with more expertise in the field.
And I frankly support that completely. I think this is an extraordinarily sophisticated issue to try to determine and separate local issues and local interest implementation issues from, what I guess I'd call national perception issues. And I think it's good to do. I think we may be able to learn some things that will help us as a local Board of Education, but that's, I think, what our focus has got to be. See what they say. I mean, if it can be done reasonably cost effectively with some hope for getting some meaningful data, then I think we should do it.
The second recommendation was some folks out of Harvard. I contacted Unicom first. If the proposal this week is something unbearable, we can think again about doing it locally, or maybe make some overtures to the folks in Harvard and see if there's some interest there to work with us. I think, again, if I heard anything at our last meeting, it was that it is important that we continue to listen, and I want to make sure that we're listening well. I want to make sure that we do a good job with this. I would rather ask the questions thoughtfully and know that we get usable information than rush. The draft that I have mentioned a couple times wasn't written by me, because I have been struggling with how to put this together. The draft that I saw was better than the work that I was doing, but I think getting some professional advice in this area is going to be worthwhile.
That sounds terrific. Two of the things that you said a number of times, a number of ways that sounded particularly good to me were at the smaller meetings, you're going to chart what people say, you're going to record what people say, and give the opportunity for people to speak and focus on listening more than presenting at those smaller meetings. I think that's terrific. And I think it's terrific for a survey to be conducted where your focus at all times is to get actionable information. If we don't get data that we can act on out of a survey, then why do a survey? So,
well, a couple things I would say. I mean, I hear all of these comments, and I think they're valid. I don't think necessarily that getting information from a survey requires you to act on it. I think having information as a baseline is important, and I think there's also a certain amount of timeliness to it. We're a full year into implementation, and the summer is a good time for people to reflect on what happened last year. Once you get into 6 to 8 weeks, you're muddying the next school year with what happened the year before, so it provides a concrete place to do it. I agree that Common Core itself is a complicated issue, but really understanding or listening to the parents in terms of what they've experienced via their kids in terms of challenge, engagement, basic stuff that the parents are going to be aware of. I don't think that's necessarily requires an expert to discern. In fact, I think we are the experts in that, in the sense that we understand as a whole the board instruction, or we should understand that in our district, and how our implementation may or may not have impacted that. So while I understand the logic in involving somebody else, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, and it may have us come up with questions that really weren't the ones that we as a board are interested in. I guess we'll have the opportunity to influence that. And the other thing I would say is that the climate survey included a number of questions about instruction and engagement and challenge, yet none of those questions came to the board or by the board. And that's one thing I've just asked for, over a period of years, actually, is to just have a little bit more opportunity for the board to provide input into the questions that we're asking of the community. And I don't believe that occurred, with, for example, a draft of the climate survey before it went out. And those are things that I would like to see as a board member. Like you say, you don't want survey fatigue, but there may be important questions that, the board would like answers to. And whether it's one survey or two surveys, one about climate and one about instruction. And, this may fall in well with the instructional subcommittee that we're looking at.
Right.
But, I would actually prefer to get a baseline, or at least provide the opportunity for people to provide sort of free-form comments, because I feel like there's a certain amount of pressure that's built up in the community, and having at least a vehicle for commenting on implementation, and just, even if it's free text, might release some of that. I mean, what we've heard from the, presentations on Common Core is that we haven't listened enough. We've presented too much didactic information. And while we're planning to do that starting in October, it's a long time in. So I would be more in favor of seeing if we could come up with something that is not controversial in the sense we shouldn't be asking, do you like Common Core? Do you want to implement Common Core? That's not our question. The question is, where are we in your perception of Guilford instruction, over the last year in terms of challenge, engagement, level of homework, what have you noticed has been happening? And now, to me, seems like the perfect time to ask it. So I would not be in favor of delaying that. I'm not saying I would be opposed to involving somebody for something down the line or in the future, maybe next summer. But I would prefer to, have something, in our hands that encapsulates what happened over the last year. So that's my kind of take on this. And as you know, we've had a conversation about this, and I have been working with some board members just circulating a draft to see if, we could come up with some things, and I'm prepared to share that more widely. But the feedback I got was that it was, reasonable questions to ask that other board members were interested in. So, we didn't engage professionals to do the climate survey, which is also, touchy and political stuff. And I think we probably have the expertise to do a reasonable job in asking questions that we want to hear answers to without necessarily, getting a PR firm involved. But I think it's reasonable for maybe the next time or thinking about it, but I'd be more in favor of gathering some baseline information and opinions earlier rather than later.
I second what you've said.
One of the things that I'm troubled about in this whole questionnaire issue is the self-selection problem. There are some people in the community and in any community who feel very strongly on a particular issue, and they'll jump all over this survey. But my guess is that a large number of people in the community haven't formed an opinion yet and may not respond to the survey. And if we could find a way, this telephone sampling idea is appealing to me. If we could find a way to get to understand what the overall feeling of the community was, as opposed to the very activist portion of the community, which we know.
I'll tell you, that's a survey technique where you take a random sample and make sure you get answers from those people. To do that via phone is really outdated in terms of methodology. You're self-selecting people that answer the phone, and that's kind of a rare bunch these days. If you do pick a sample of people and then try to contact them via phone, via email, via postal mail, and to get a non-biased sample, I agree with that as a methodology. But that's something, that we could do.
I agree with Dr. Moore. The time is of the essence, and the sooner that we can get some information. We keep hearing, at meetings that we're not hearing from enough people, that, we get stories or, but that people aren't coming to meetings, people aren't sending emails, that there's just a few people, and this would give us some preliminary, and if we're not happy, then we could go and do something else. But I think getting it done sooner than later.
And I agree. You may, to Ted's point, get a certain number of people that are very fired up about this and respond. But that is information in itself, how many that is. We've heard from a few, but to me that is information. How widespread that is and how articulate people are and what they have to say.
Well, Dr. Freeman has said that he's expecting information by the end of the week. That doesn't strike me as unreasonable, frankly, either in terms of a possible methodology or possible expense or possible timeline. I don't know. I'm distrustful of email surveys, frankly, because people that are interested or particularly motivated respond, but I don't know what percentage of email surveys do I respond to?
I'm just saying
Not
that
many.
is a multiple-pronged approach to, you define a subset of people that you want to get a response from, and then you really make sure that you get a response from them, whether that's via phone, email, mail, knock on their door. Some people are not going to respond no matter what you do, and you can't control for that. But
I would think an entity like Unicom, if it's as described, would be someone that's in a good position of knowing the proper approach.
No, if they can do it, quickly, economically, and have input that is meaningful from the board, I'm not opposed to it. But I think timing is important. I think 8 weeks is on the outside where I'd like to see it. But
I don't really think we should rush into something that is going to come out and We want to make sure it's a quality survey, that we're doing the right thing. I think after some of these information nights, there are a broader spectrum of people will be better informed, know more about what they're talking about. I think a lot of times people are responding to things that does not relate to really to Guilford itself. It's things that you can see things on the internet and what's out there in general that does not apply to Guilford as we are here. So I don't think we should be rushing into it. I think we should wait and make sure we get a quality instrument that's going to give us information that we can be assured is a broad spectrum of the community and that we can use and it can be valuable.
I agree with that. I think that the survey would be more productive and we could design it better after we go through the other parts of the process here, the listening sessions and so on. But I do share that concern that waiting until
Well, yeah, if the
October to
listening
start that
sessions
is-
are in
Well-
November
is
and
far away.
October,
Yeah.
then
I
then we're
agree with you.
past that to do a survey.
It's a practical thing, though. I mean, I see there being two different things that we're talking about sort of at the same time here. One is a survey at a surface level will learn some information, general information about sentiment, but I don't see much. I got to confess, I'm just generally cynical of surveys in general. Much like Attorney Bloss said, I take the same approach when I receive a survey, and much like Dr. Friedman said, I took, as part of my poli-sci training, I learned enough to be cynical of surveys. And even those self-selected people who do, despite how well and thoroughly you try to make sure it is a randomized sample, even those people that do answer don't always tell the truth or say what they're really saying. Some people like to sort of game the survey, for lack of better.
Those are all true, but the
So-
issue is that as a board member, we've heard from certain people who are concerned about implementation and have been, I don't know, told a few times that it seems like this is a fringe group and it's just a few people. Maybe that's true, but if you have a better way of figuring that out, I don't know of it. Surveys, for all their flaws, remain the only way that I'm really aware of to systematically gather opinions.
Well, that's
from
why I
people.
began by saying sort of two things, a confluence of two things. The other is getting qualitative information, and it seems like the best instrument for that is small session listening sessions where you write down anecdotal comments. I learned a lot at the Guilford High School, the library forum, the one forum we did have, but there was less time than perhaps we all would have liked in retrospect for listening and taking down comments, but it was a good starting point. So
I have heard that we need to begin the listening meetings earlier, and I think that having something that is district-wide is early in September before moving into the more neighborhood conversations. So we simply add another one and push it into late August, early September to kick off the school year. That would be larger and central and simply district-wide.
Maybe this is what you're thinking about, but maybe I think we have said that the board would do one of those meetings specifically, and so I don't know if that's what you would suggest in August. I think we've said that we would do that, and I think we should.
I did mention a simply public hearing, a specific topic public hearing in the way that the board does around budget. And quite honestly, I think as I'm thinking about district-wide, to schedule a special meeting of the Board of Education as a public hearing on Common Core state standards, allowing people to express concerns, wonders, I need to know more about statements, would then help Dr. Keene and I shape the small group conversations that would happen. And when we talk about charting feedback, that would have minutes that would be collected just in the way that our public hearings on budget do. If we were to do that to kick off the school year, I did express my concern to Mr. Wright today about timeliness and that I need his information quickly and that we would hope to have this at the beginning of the school year, no later than the beginning of the school year. So he knows that I'm already pushing on his 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks was the framework that he suggested when I asked how long this takes to do it well. And Mr. Kazin, I was going to make another comment, and I've lost it. I have completely forgotten it. It was in response to something that you said, but I've forgotten, and I apologize.
I would like to echo or say what it sounded like I heard a little bit, which is the ability to participate in some of that discussion with Mr. White or whoever about questions. I think there are some people put a lot of time and energy into thinking about some of these questions, and I think that would be important. I would say, as someone who does evaluation for a living, that I do think actionable items are, in fact, kind of important. I have a concern that baseline data can be helpful, but if it suggests to community that we're going to do something and then we don't, that's a real problem. And if we are collecting baseline data and we're going to change something and then test again, baseline data is very helpful. If we're not changing anything, baseline data doesn't serve a great purpose. So I think I agree that we want to know how people feel, but I think we need to make sure that we know what the goal of the survey is. I mean, what do we hope to get out of it? Not just information, but what do we hope to really learn? And what are we expecting that we, as a board and an administration, are going to do to address what we hear? And if we're not prepared to act, I think we need to be very careful about how and what we ask. Not because we don't want people to be honest with us, and I think it's crucial, but I don't want to ask questions that we're not going to do anything about. That's not fair to anybody.
But an initial survey of people's opinions shouldn't have to, to me, it doesn't have to be actionable. I mean, it's opinions. It's a gathering of, and then.
And we are in the midst of one of the bigger changes.
No, I agree, but there are things that we cannot change. Common Core is not in our control.
I agree.
Not in our control. So that I think we just have to be really careful in getting feedback from people to make sure that what we get are things that we can actually do something about and things we are willing to do something about.
But I think parents have done a ton of research about the Common Core and know what the Common Core is, and the questions are around how it's implemented in a school district, Guilford. And if we can get opinions on that, then that could sort of be actionable in what we do going forward in these.
Mm-hmm.
We know what people
so we're saying the same thing.
What people's opinions are, but I think doing that sooner rather than later that's. I don't think we have to go in expecting to fix something with the first go at this. I think we need to hear opinions and let that take us through the GCTV informational video.
Well, how many people are here? 8? I think I'm sensing about maybe 6 to 7 different, at least short-term views. I mean, at a minimum, can we agree that we ought to get the proposal that Dr. Freeman is solicited and see what they say? Does anybody object to getting that information and then moving forward, assuming that's going to be done by the end of the week?
I'm hoping to have something by the end of this week. If I don't see it by morning on Friday, I'll call back.
Okay.
I'd ask you to share any draft questions, any previous submissions of potential survey questions.
And also, I think I heard that you were considering that we would have a meeting of the Board of Ed in September to listen to what.
Or August.
Right, so let me,
August.
right.
I mean, which I think sooner is better.
I'll try to summarize some of what I see as steps moving forward, because I think that I can be more clear on one component. The first thing that Mr. Wright suggested doing is coming to Guilford and not just meeting with me to help shape the questions. He talked about hosting focus groups in the same way that Dr. Borland has talked about hosting focus groups. So if the entire process is 6 to 8 weeks, in the next couple or 3 weeks, he's going to be here, and he's going to be asking me to help put together groups of community members who have a concern or have expressed interest in this topic, and groups of staff members who are willing to come in over the summer and speak with him. He will then help us to shape the questions that we want to ask after receiving that community feedback. Not broad community feedback, but focused in focus groups. At the same time, I'll work with Mr. Bloss to schedule a hearing of the Board of Education so that the board can hear broadly and without shape, just openly from the community on this topic. If we get the survey drafted, we will then launch the survey, and we will then continue to follow through with the other suggested topics that we have. It doesn't mean we won't start putting together a GCTV component with all of the context and history and information. We'll do that at the same time that we're rolling these other items out forward. At the retreat, we will be having this conversation with all of the administrators in the district, including 2 new principals, and helping to shape how this is talked about at back-to-school nights, with teacher convocation, with new staff induction, and how we begin to roll out year 2 of the formal implementation of Common Core state standards. Again, I'd also note, we've been working on this since 2010. So while last year was the first formal rollout, this board has had numerous meetings about Common Core state standards. There have been other informational components, and all of that archived information remains on our website. We need to add to that, and then we need to really build the listening component of all of that. But I think that I have work to move forward, and I hope to move it forward in the next few days.
It'd be worthwhile, like, bringing together a smaller number of people to, some sort of a task force to look at that stuff and try to move it along between board meetings? Or?
Yeah, what I'm not hearing is that this board wants me to wait until the August meeting to come back and talk about Mr. Wright's proposal. So in between the meetings, I'll either have to ask for a special meeting of the board or do something to move that work forward in the interim. At least keep this board apprised of what the proposal looks like. If it falls below the bidding threshold, then it's certainly something that I can move forward on my own authority. But I know the board is engaged in this conversation and wouldn't do it without keeping you apprised of that work moving forward. I certainly wouldn't send out invitations and notice the focus group meetings without keeping this board filled in and taking your temperature on the work moving forward. I'd be happy and will take advantage of a couple of board volunteers who would want to meet with me and move that work forward outside of a formal posted meeting. I could use the support of the board as we move this forward.
And in terms of the general timing of a board meeting on this issue, dedicated to this issue, we don't have workshop meetings in July and August ordinarily. If we scheduled this in lieu of a July or an August workshop, is July too soon?
I think July would be too soon. I think we could certainly target August. I think we would have to accept the fact that we would probably not have full representation. We probably will not be able to get all 9 board members on a common night beyond the already scheduled board meeting.
Well, the fourth Monday would be the 25th of August, which I think is the first week of school, right?
Yeah,
Now,
no, I'd rather move it up. I'm
other
thinking
reasons.
more like early August, not
Okay.
deep into August. It might be fairly
Yeah,
close
no,
to
look,
our
I mean,
regular business meeting.
It's the summer. I mean, there were going to be people that aren't going to be able to make it, but, if we can work on that. So your preference would be to try to do it between tonight and the next regular board meeting, which is, I think, August 11th?
Well, if the agenda's light for the next meeting, maybe we could try to combine it that night.
Maybe.
Oh, no.
I
I think we need to dedicate a whole night to this.
I wonder about trying to put it close. I think if most of the board members are planning on being in town and present for our regular board meeting on the 11th, if we tried to do it on the 12th or even the 13th, it would be a couple nights out, but we might catch all of you after you're back or before you go to some summer getaway. And so maybe if we tied them, I agree, Ted, not on the same evening, but maybe close in date.
Not on the same.
We do it during budget season. We do 2 back-to-back.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll work with you, Mr.
Okay,
Bloss,
that's
and
fine.
we'll pick a
Is
date.
everybody generally okay with that, though,
Yeah.
to try to do it
Yes.
sometime in mid-August?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That's good.
What else on?
We did miss one item. On the same topic and of import, the governor had convened a task force around the implementation, this first year's implementation of the Common Core state standards. They were charged with identifying lessons learned and making recommendations. We did receive the report of that task force. We have distributed it to all of you, and I have asked Dr. Keene if she would highlight some of the major takeaways from that report for us.
So Governor Malloy did appoint a 25-member task force to look at the implementation of the Common Core state standards in Connecticut schools. They use both a quantitative and a qualitative review. So they had site visits or presentations from 6 school districts and looked at 2 surveys, one from CAPS on the feedback from superintendents across Connecticut and the one from CEA about teachers and their implementation and how they felt about the amount of training they received or what was their priority to get to that training. So the executive summary at the beginning of the document, and we will send this to you in electronic link. I'm sorry, it's very light, and so the print may not be great in your hard copy. But basically, they studied the best practices around the Common Core state standards implementation and made some recommendations, 5 major recommendations. One, make sure that people know the standards and know them well. And when we say people, we're talking about the school, teachers, principals, administrators, board members, community members. Do they really know the standards? Second, make sure that there's educator support and training for the transition to new curricula. And that people understand the instructional shifts, the 6 instructional shifts, 3 in English language arts and 3 in mathematics that we have gone over several times on several occasions. That we communicate more. And we know that we can never communicate enough. And that's not only communicating with parents and the public, but also the communications with our staff and with our administrators, and to align the resources that we have and to look for other resources that are aligned, not just ones that say they are aligned, but checking carefully that they truly are aligned. This executive order from Governor Malloy is on page 3 of the document. It's Executive Order 41, and it references a May 2009 memorandum of agreement signed by then Governor Jody Rell and Commissioner Mark McQuillan on about the Common Core state standards, and then in July 2010 it was adopted by the state board. And I think that sometimes people forget about how it actually got started. They did conduct a gap analysis and did some analysis. I've kind of given you the summary of their recommendations, but basically they're saying successful districts started the transition early. They phased it in over several years, and they provided units and lessons and sample exemplars for staff to use as models to change or to implement the curriculum. I think that we have done those things enough, probably never can do it enough, but we have started in a very, very serious way for the past 3 years. Another piece was about really looking at our staffing, and since the Common Core state standards, we did employ a math specialist just around that curriculum document, and also a technology integration specialist to really look at the technology and how we're using that in instructional ways. So I'll give you, please feel free to read this at your leisure, and I will send you a direct link. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of the report from the task force. We will put it on our website too for the public, but it's the Educators Common Core Implementation Task Force that was initiated by Governor Malloy last March. It was completed on June 30th, and the first week of July we did receive a report, and we wanted to share it with you tonight.
So I read through this, I found the comments actually to be the most helpful part, but my question was for the task force. They stated they were looking for data to see how districts successfully implemented Common Core. How do they define success of the districts?
My question exactly.
They didn't define it in the document, but I think what they were looking for were early adopters, and
So it's sort of
people
like
that-
if people did the Common Core, that was successful. It wasn't really about whether implementing a Common Core was successful for their district in terms of instruction or anything
No,
like
because
that.
there's no student performance data that is available yet. You're right, there's no student measure that we can look to say, this is done well. I think they're looking for districts who are reporting successful implementation. It's based on anecdotal evidence and self-reporting, I believe. There's no hard data to be looked at this time around student performance related to the new standards.
I believe part of what they were defining as success is those people who said, yes, we are implementing. Because there are a lot of districts that had not begun,
That was the sense of
or that we are, but it
Astounding.
is more around the self-report. It
So
was
the
just a
successful
task force.
districts communicated
It's a
more, did
low
more,
bar.
spent more money, did more, I mean, it's kind of, I don't
Yeah.
know, it's self-fulfilling.
Well, and then the comments, I mean, you're right, the comments are interesting. On the other hand, you don't know what districts they're from.
Yeah.
Are they districts where they just started implementing 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago?
and I'm not saying that
Are
they're
they,
You're right.
you know,
systematic assessment. They were just the most important or interesting part
They're
of it.
interesting, absolutely.
And this was just sharing this report from this task force
Mm-hmm.
with you tonight, and it is a public document, and we do think that there's some, things that they have come up with that, can help us as well. We've had a Common Core State Standards team that communicates and has become teacher leaders in each building, but we need to do more of that kind of work too.
I was interested on their initial gap analysis. They mentioned briefly, sorry, there are no page numbers here as far as I can tell.
It's at the very top.
Oh, it's
Top
done,
left.
sorry, page 7. While successful districts benefited from established benchmarks and strategic plans mapped out over several years, the realization of uniform implementation would have benefited from a strong benchmarked implementation plan provided by the state, which quite frankly makes me quite nervous.
There are several references in here to the role of Connecticut State Department of Education and what they could have done differently or better, as well as what districts could do differently or better, and what communities could do differently or better. So
Well,
basically,
I guess my concern is that while this is, there's clearly a standardization effort that's part of the Common Core, to have the state with the kind of the variety of districts, the variety of school systems, I don't know. I get a
Well,
little,
I mean, this is
I'm a
one-
little cynical. I get a little nervous about the
Yeah, it's a
state
fair
starting to
point, but this is one of
dictate
these kind of chicken and egg problems,
Right.
Either the state is going to impose a blanket curricular document on all 169 towns, or each town is going to be able to develop its own curriculum, which is where we are right now, but then you're going to be in a situation where, according to this document, a third of the districts haven't finished developing their curriculum a year into implementation. So, you're in a set of circumstances where there doesn't seem to be a politically palatable outcome, right? And perhaps not an educationally ideal outcome, but
For what it's worth, I appreciated the moment of self-awareness where they recognized that they could have been more supportive to local districts in this work over the last 3 years.
supportive
So-
doesn't necessarily mean imposing
Right.
no, but
Right.
tools
I agree,
are-
Katie.
Right.
It could not be the same in some districts across Connecticut. There are too many different districts across Connecticut. But a moment of realization that they could have been more supportive in
Oh,
different
right,
ways
I think
than
that's a
this work
different,
was-
yeah, I
was
think of those
appreciated,
things
at least
differently,
momentarily.
but, yeah.
well, and allegedly, the Department of Education has agreed to already fund this to some degree. They're apparently going to put $5 million into this. I don't know whether that's going to mean anything to us and whether that's going to help with any training issues or anything else. I guess we'll see, but, at least they did put some money behind it. But
And to be fair to the State Department, when, Mark McQuillan left shortly after that memorandum was signed, and there was an interim commissioner in 2010, George Coleman, and then in 2011 or later in 2011, it was when our current commissioner, Stephen Fryer, did come on board, and the department was reorganized. So there was a lot of transition going on at the state level as well. And so we did feel like we were on our own for a good bit of the initiation of the Common Core state standards, but we moved forward and we had a plan, and we started operating the plan, and we got all the information that we could. And we, feel good about what we have done as far as the recommendations of the task force. But there are things here that we can learn from as well. We will be sharing this with our district administrators, and we will post it on our website.
And it is all over the state of Connecticut's websites too, so I think anybody
Yes.
who wants to do an internet search for
Correct.
it, just look for Educators Common Core Implementation Task Force Connecticut, June 2014. It will pop right up along with the minutes of the committee. Anything else on that, or?
Just wanted to bring that to your attention as part of the larger conversation.
Okay.
A
Anything
few
else
more-
from anybody on 7.3? Okay.
I have just two other discrete items. I did want to get back to the board. The board is aware that on May 28th, we experienced a school bus accident involving a number of Guilford High School students. At approximately 11:15 on the evening of May 28th, two school buses were traveling home from an event. It was an awards event related to our musical theater program. It's a statewide Halo Awards. Our students were recognized at that event, but on the way home there was a bus accident. I have stayed in contact with STA. I have asked for them to give me pertinent documentation and a disposition of the case. What I'd like to share with the board tonight is both a description of the accident, a determination as to cause, and then what the disposition has been moving forward in my conversations with STA. It is worth noting that STA is a vendor to the school system. All employees are employees of STA. We hire their services through a contract with STA, the corporation. On that evening at approximately 11:15, two of our buses were traveling back following each other from Waterbury. The buses were turning right from Route 147 onto Route 17 in the Durham area. The first bus navigated the turn and then began approaching a red light. The second bus began navigating the turn. It appears that the driver was watching the rearview mirror to see that the back of the bus cleared the turn, did not realize that the first bus was coming to a stop at the red light, was unable to stop in time, and struck the rear of the bus. Guilford High School staff on the buses responded expertly. Guilford High School administration reported to the scene of the accident, and state police reported to the scene of the accident. One student was transported for medical examination, and ultimately we had 12 students who ended up being diagnosed with concussions from the accident. Guilford police helped coordinate with the arrival of our students here in town, and I received numerous compliments about how well the Guilford police, STA staff, but particularly the Guilford High School staff, supported their kids. I was in the building the next day, and the comment that I heard over and over again from the students on the buses were that as soon as they saw Mr. Macenti on the scene in his jeans, they knew that everything was going to be okay. He reported from his home to the scene of the accident. The cause of the accident was determined to be driver error. Both buses were in appropriate functioning mechanical condition. All of the appropriate reviews of the documentation was complete. In fact, the second bus had new brakes that had been installed, I believe, 60 days before the accident. So both buses had all the appropriate documentation. Both buses were in appropriate working order. The driver, per her contract with STA, submitted to a urine sample, and that came back clean for both alcohol or drug use. There was no substance use or abuse that was related to the accident. The state police on the scene determined that it was driver error. She was ticketed on the scene for following too closely. She was suspended by STA. The drug screen was administered. She was required to go through safety training. She was retrained on safety training. A letter has been entered into her file. The driver has been an employee of STA and a driver in Guilford for 15 years without incident. At this time, both the state police and STA have determined that it was driver error, that she was at fault. They have retrained her, and they have returned her to duty. Both buses have since been re-evaluated mechanically. The first bus has been returned to service. The second bus cannot be returned to service until it is cleared once more. It is still at DATCO mechanical being completed, and it has to be evaluated before it'll be returned to service. I think that the STA staff responded well. They were on the phone with me minutes after the accident occurred. They've stayed in touch with me repeatedly through the process. I believe that they have responded thoroughly and well to the situation. We will continue to monitor. It was an unfortunate accident. I am glad that there were no more serious injuries than the concussions that were reported. I know that the high school made accommodations for students in the end of the year requirements that were expected of them. It was not a great year. It's not a great way for a number of kids to end their year, but I think that everybody responded well, STA included.
Well, this incident, I think we still need to know a little bit more. In particular, I'd like to know two things. One, I'd like to know whether this incident occurred at 11 o'clock at night.
11:15 p.m., that's
Yeah.
correct.
Had the driver been working during the day so that the person was in effect fatigued when they were pressed into service to do this, or was a person scheduled to drive this particular assignment, because this bus was scheduled ahead of time.
Yes, we knew this was a planned event. We knew this event was occurring.
And so, I mean, if you make a person work long enough, they'll get tired. So I'd like to know the answer to that. And I think at the next meeting, it would be appropriate for STA to have a representative here. And I would like to have them explain to us what they have learned from this incident and what they're going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because they're vendors to us and their contract will come up. And we need to have satisfactory answers to these questions. They should be here at the next meeting.
I can make that happen.
Everybody agree with that? Any?
Next meeting being a
August.
workshop meeting, right?
No, August, there is no workshop
I
meeting.
would plan that for the regular business meeting in August.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any harm in doing that. If I would feel much higher necessity for doing that if there was something systemic, like brakes, say,
Yeah.
or alcohol, or something else. Now, the hours, I think, are a completely
I
fair
can't
question.
answer that question.
But I
I
think
will
it's got to be
follow up on that.
clarified. Because I think aren't there maximum hours of service for...
Commercial truck drivers, I'm not sure about school bus
Yeah.
drivers.
I don't recall that in the contract off the top of my head, but I can look.
It wouldn't necessarily be in the contract. It would be a federal, like a Federal Motor
Or it could
Carrier
be a
Safety
state
Administration.
regulation.
I can look that up.
I thought you knew these regs, come on. Okay, I mean, that's a fair systemic question, I think, for us. If a driver makes a mistake, that's one thing. We do have certain contractual rights, obviously, that they have certain performance obligations. They, by the way, are responsible per contract for compensating anybody who was hurt. That's their problem. They've got insurance.
It's
Our
not the
goal.
compensation,
No, I
it's the-
understand. Our goal is to try to be as reasonable as we can under the circumstances to ensure that we've got a suitable service provider, right? And if the brakes were bad, I think we would have had him in here 4 weeks ago, right? And or whenever it was. But I don't think there's any harm in doing that, and just getting some clarification on those issues.
And I think framing the question in lessons learned and how will you move forward and be better is absolutely a healthy and positive question moving forward. I think that I anticipate that they will be happy to take us up on the invitation. I will contact them and invite them to be at our next meeting.
Good.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
The other
Go ahead.
communication we received about that, which we discussed a bit at the last meeting, was just about communication with the community as a whole, or the school community. As I understand it, the children who are involved in the accident, obviously, them and their parents were communicated to, and we got a communication that I believe the staff got. But did the general student population or GPS community get a communication about what happened?
No, and we've talked about that as a
Yeah.
team. We've debriefed that. You're exactly right. The parents of the students who were involved in the incident were contacted. The Board of Education was informed, and staff members at the high school were informed. We did not send out a general notice to the general school or high school population.
Because it was actually like on the news and everything, right? So it's public knowledge that, yeah, so it just seems like that would be.
One of the things that, in a conversation with the parent that we heard from, that I offered to do was also look at, as a member of the policy committee, just look what we have in terms of communication in emergency matters and see if it would be appropriate to add something there.
And we've debriefed the practice. Mrs. Hahn, Mr. Macenti, and I have talked about not a policy level, but a practice level. When something happens at 11 o'clock at night, what are the appropriate vehicles and level of information to share when something like that happens?
Okay. All right, is that it under your?
No, the last item is very discreet.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Very short, individual, and not connected to anything else, although I've referenced it earlier in the meeting. I did want to note for the board, and you have a copy of this in your packet, but we have been invited to become part of the Suburban School Superintendents Network. This is a group of 150 school districts across the country. They're all fairly affluent, high-achieving, recognized as premier school districts across the country. There are 3 representative districts from each state at any one time. At this time, the other 2 districts from Connecticut that are part of the organization are Wilton and Granby. Guilford has been invited to be a participant in this. I did reference that although we're not formally members, I've already taken advantage of the network. It is a group of similar districts spread across the country that may be facing similar challenges, struggling with similar expectations, trying to go from really high quality to better every day. And so the opportunity to be part of such an organization, to be invited into such an organization, I think is valuable to the district, but wanted to make sure that I mentioned it to the board before moving forward and accepting the invitation to be part of this. Guilford did something similar some years back with the Project Blueprint schools. It was a little bit of a grassroots attempt to create the same sort of network. I think we gained value from that over time, but over the last few years we have slipped away from some of those districts with whom we partnered. This is a more formal, more long-standing organization. They've got solid roots, and they have already offered assistance to Guilford, and so it's something that I was excited about and proud to bring forward to the board. And with your endorsement, we'll accept their invitation and take advantage of what they have to offer.
Can I ask, what's the requirement of your time?
It is the attendance at one annual meeting and to remain an active part of the network in ways that I've already started to be. That if somebody has questions, we share our experiences with them. It is a 2-day annual meeting that I'm expected to participate in, and participation is contingent upon being at that meeting. If you're not at the meeting one year, you are not in the network the next year. It is not one of these, yeah, that sounds nice, I'd like to participate, which is really the reason for bringing it to the board. I want to make sure that the board continues to see value in our participation in these kinds of networks. We work with IFL, we work locally with the Connecticut Center for School Change and the Connecticut Superintendents Network. We get some diversity there. That gives us the opportunity to see what schools are doing in Hartford and Stamford, as well as in Weston and Waterford. But this is a little bit different. This is a national perspective, and it is all similarly situated school districts.
Sounds like it would be very beneficial.
Yeah, do we need a motion on this?
I don't think so,
I didn't think
frankly.
so. I
think
just
so.
wanted to have a sense of the board, yeah.
I think this is fine.
I just wanted to make sure that I presented it to the board and that the board was aware. No, I don't think it's anything that requires board action, but it was something that I was proud to bring to you.
Okay.
It's great.
And that does conclude my report, Mr. Bloss.
Okay, good. All right. All right, item 8.1 is to act on a series of personnel items. And they are, first of all, some resignations for the purpose of retirement. Those include Lori Shaw from Jones, 24 years, Donald Giles from Adams, 13 years, Gail Taylor from Adams, 37 years, Sharon Mayer at Jones and Lee, 25 years, and Cheryl Grappi, 37 years at Adams. Is there a motion that we ratify their resignations for the purpose of retirement?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And you will express our thanks.
These are significant retirements from individuals who have made significant contributions. I will express the board's gratitude and extend an invitation.
These 5 people alone have 136 years of service to the community of Guilford. Just these 5. Shows great commitment to our school system.
I'll remind the board that every time somebody retires from the district, I extend an invitation to conduct an exit interview, and we'll extend that invitation to these individuals. I have a chance to thank them for their service and ask 2 questions. What do we do well, and what do we need to continue to protect and support in the district, and what can we do better? And every one of the conversations is enlightening when I get to sit with folks who have spent 37 years, for instance, in a school district and are willing to share what they've gleaned in that experience. I will extend that invitation, and I will express the board's thanks.
How many retirements is that now for this year?
I believe it brings us to 16 for this year.
All right.
I will have that in my next personnel report, but I believe it's 16.
Okay.
25 vacancies total in teaching. That includes the increased positions, some movement for other reasons, but I believe it's 16.
All right. Well, speaking of other positions, there are a proposal that we ratify the appointment of 8 teachers, not all of them full-time equivalents, I think 2 or less than full-time. But is there a motion that we ratify the appointment of the following: James Holleran, mathematics, 0.2 FTE at Baldwin, Emily Gay, Cox, grade 1, Jennifer Lisi, Baldwin, grade 5, Christine McGregor, high school, social studies, alternative ed, Robert Shopper, Baldwin, grade 6, Caitlin DeStefano, Cox, grade 2, Ashley Isak, counselor at the high school, and Jennifer DiDonato, special ed at Lakes.
Can I ask a question? What does this mean, rescind non-renewal for Holleran?
Mr. Holleran was hired last year in the same position on a 1-year appointment. So at the end of this school year, per legislation, his position was non-renewed. When we determined that we had continued need for the .2, we rescinded the non-renewal and are reappointing him to the position. So we have not gone through an interview process with him, but he was officially released from the position at the end of the school year, and now that we have continuing need for it, we're hiring him back into the same position which he filled last year.
As a .2 FTE, is that just like 1 or 2 periods, or how?
It's essentially a couple periods a day, and this is a situation where we are working to meet the needs of a student's math ability that falls outside the regular classroom's teacher's ability to meet that. This is a situation where a student's been accelerated, and 2 students, I believe, it might be 3, are receiving math instruction outside of their grade level. This is a 7 through 12 high school experienced math teacher who's working with some of our Baldwin students.
Okay. Is there a motion that we ratify these appointments?
Seconded.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
I'd
Opposed?
just like to comment that it's nice to see these new teachers have 34 years of experience. Many of them are coming to us with 8 and 10 years of experience, as opposed to a time when we always used to hire no experienced teachers, so it would save so much money. It's nice to see that experienced people will be coming into these positions.
I appreciate that acknowledgement. It's something that we've been aware of, considering the number of retirements that we and other districts have seen in the last number of years. We're trying to be cautious when we have, did you say 130 some odd years of experience that is going. We want to be careful that we are cognizant of our capacity, and that even though people are new to Guilford, they're not all new to the teaching profession. That would stretch our ability to support them. So we are trying to make careful and strategic decisions about where experience is going to be more beneficial. We're still aware of our budget line, but we have to make sure that we have the right people in front of our students every day. We hire the best teachers. Wow.
Flash flood.
That was a flash flood. I think it's also impressive that the majority of these new teachers have a master's degree. I think that's
Yes.
very important. That's a good
We're-
sign for us.
We're seeing more and more of the teachers are coming into their first job with a master's degree. UConn graduates come with their teaching credentials and a master's degree out of their preparation. We're seeing more and more of that. I said earlier, I will repeat it, I've been very impressed with the process and with the quality of the candidates that I'm seeing coming out of the schools. Good. I hope my windows are closed.
Flash
Okay.
flood warning.
Yeah, just, that's what I was saying.
8.2 is to act on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment documents for the high school building project. We did talk about this, I think, at the last workshop meeting.
Workshop.
right,
Last
where
workshop that
and the documents have been available, the underlying foundational documents have been available. This is a requirement of state law that the Board of Ed sign off on these requests, although it is fundamentally, that belongs to the building committee to make the purchase out of the appropriated funds and as part of the bond package. So let's first, can we have a motion that we approve the, how do we need to phrase it, approve the FF&E documents as requested by the building committee for the building project,
And as presented.
as presented last month?
I'll make that
So,
motion.
seconded.
Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts?
I'll admit I didn't have time to read the entire document, but one of the questions that came up at the workshop meeting was just about having adequate computer resources, and I guess we had talked about that not really coming from FF&E, but that we will be able to do that with existing resources and the technology leads, and I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that, because it seems like a big part of a new high school would be, adequate computer facilities.
There is a second line item. So this FF&E line item, the allowance is $2.7 million. It is for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It is exclusive of technology. There's a separate line item, and we are beginning work on that line item now, which will come forward to you as well. The approach, the strategy that was adopted by the building committee and the architects, as many of the computers in this new school are already laptop or tablet, and we are moving in that direction. So we have focused our lease purchases in that direction. Much of that line item was identified to be towards infrastructure, and that we would move the user stations to the new school. There was some interest in that decision that was expressed by board members at the last meeting, so as we pull that group together, I will be sure to coordinate with board members, get your feedback, and make you aware of when those meetings are happening so that that can be explored. This line item totals $2.5 million of the 2.7 allocation. And while I know that this document is difficult to digest, tried to send board members a simple inventory as well as a number of visuals showing what a standard classroom set would be, what a standard office set would be, what the cafeteria set will be. And I'll remind the board, all of these specifics in here are design specifics. This is a bid document, essentially. So while we have identified individual pieces and individual vendors, that is only as a basis for design. When the bid comes back, as with every bid, it may come in on the dot at $2.5 million. It may come in below. It may come in above. There is a contingency that was built into this. I will say that the building committee has done lengthy and exceptional work on this. I would also like to commend the Guilford High School staff. We have had multiple meetings with high school staff. We met with groups of teachers. We met with department chairs. We had samples that were delivered for people to look at. Mr. Macenti has spent hours on this. And I want to commend Dr. Keene and the work that was done with the Learning Studio here. In no other project have I seen a community that outfitted one classroom in the way that we expect it could look in our future school, and then encouraged community groups, the Board of Education, and teachers in the building to go and see that set and look at how furniture can affect instruction. We were part of a study that Herman Miller conducted. I believe we were the only public high school to be part of that data collection. And I need to note, there wasn't a single meeting where a classroom teacher came in and requested a tablet desk. In every single setting, teachers came in knowing that furniture could help to shape what they were capable of doing in their classroom and making really thoughtful, really informed requests for how we're going to supply this building. It's a huge building project, but this single FF&E, this represents the part of the building that interacts most directly with the students every single day. HVAC is important, but it falls to the background. The furniture in the classroom, the equipment in the technology labs, the materials in the art studio, those directly affect the student experience every day, and this is a really important document that you approve here tonight.
Can I ask a question too? I have a couple of questions. One on the perhaps 40-page packet dated June 26th. Under category AA, alternate items, we have a different total cost and 5 additional items listed than the total cost on what you emailed us and just handed. So there's a $40,000 difference. Did these 5 items get taken off since that June?
Can you help me with the page number?
Sure. Sorry, page 6. And page 7. Page 7 has a total of $307,272, and the AA category on estimated eligible cost summary is $267,898.
Yep.
And when I literally compared items from page 2, the first 4 on page 6, these chairs and then music stands are not represented. So I didn't know if those were taken out.
We are repurposing a number of music stands from the existing school, so I think that one may have been changed. I think the admin chairs, there was some movement between the add alternate items and the base bid.
So are we voting on this then
Yes.
versus
Yes.
this?
This was still, this was still marked draft. And
Okay,
the final
okay.
document, and it breaks out into 3 pieces. There's the total bid totaling $2.575 million, of which $267,898 are alternate bids,
Okay.
essentially a la carte items.
Okay.
So all of this is being bid. What's on the front is the base, and I believe items moved from the alternates into the base. And
Okay.
I believe those task chairs would be
I
representative
just
of
wanted to
that.
understand where the
Yep.
40,000 difference was. Okay.
And then what we attempted to do was wherever appropriate, to repurpose equipment or furniture from this building. The best examples of that would be things like the Harkness table and the Harkness classroom. The Harkness table and the chairs associated with it are coming with us to the new high school. They're being repurposed. There was some furniture that was purchased relatively recently, and so we will make use of some of that. Other furniture from this existing building will be repurposed into other schools like Adams or Baldwin. Some of it will go into storage. Much of it will remain in the building and will become part of the demolition bid. The demo companies look at what's left in the building. If they see it as recyclable, if they see it as repurposable, it helps us get a lower bid and in fact relieves us of the responsibility of trying to get it to a good home when these companies do that professionally. So it improves our bidding position and helps us feel better about it not ending up in a landfill, it not being reused properly. These companies try to squeeze every dime they can out of it.
And then I had one more question.
Yep.
Just because we're spending $191,000 on occasional furniture.
That
is...
That is the term that speaks to flexible spaces that would
Okay,
be outside.
that's what I figured.
Yes, so you're talking about, it's not even waiting areas. There are
There's areas right in the pods.
There are the areas in the pods, but there are also areas in the commons. And so
Okay.
much of the commons is taken up with actual cafeteria and dining furniture, but there are areas in the commons that have more casual furniture, high tables and stools, or actual upholstered, more easy chairs. Outside of the media center, there is an area for for individuals to gather in
right.
furniture outside.
Okay.
In some of the, it was what's talked about in the ed specs as watering holes. We talked about places where students could congregate appropriately outside of classrooms. The 5 most significant areas would be the areas within the pods outside the classrooms. Learning areas distributed throughout the building, not always isolated into 4 walls. And those would in fact be the only sort of tablet chairs. We actually have media center easy style chairs where you could swing a tablet out for your tablet computer or your laptop computer and do work. That would be occasional furniture.
Thank you.
It's not stuff that we just use sometimes.
Well, I didn't think so.
I have a question about the bidding. Are the vendors bidding on the whole package, or are they doing more like what we do with special ed transportation, where a vendor can bid on just certain items?
It has been chunked out. It's been chunked out so that you can do a classroom bid, so that you can do certain components. Some items are integrated together, but you don't have to come in and bid on the whole 2.5. There will be specialty companies that only bid on certain components of this.
Makes sense.
This does not include equipment that is either installed or hardwired into the building, so the entire kitchen suite is not here. Anything that is installed or hardwired is considered part of construction and not part of any of this.
And the building committee has already approved this, am I right?
The building committee met this past Tuesday, and they approved this document. This simply awaits your signature to go on for state approval. It must pass state approval before it can go out to bid. And we are scheduled, I believe, for an August 6 review at the state.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded that we approve FF&E in the amount of $2,575,393. Any other comments? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? And I think we should also just note that this is less than the allocated amount within the budget. So this is, again, the committee is working within the appropriated funds and continues to not spend every dollar that's been appropriated.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Now, 8.3 is to act on some requested budget transfers. There is an exhibit that requests a transfer of a total of $600,000 within budget lines in our existing budget. $350,000 from salaries, $150,000 from benefits, $50,000 from supplies, and $50,000 from transportation, into purchased services for $350,000 and capital for $250,000. So not adding anything, not seeking any more money, but just moving some money. And I think this was talked about in the Operations Committee
Yes,
meeting.
it was.
Okay, is there a motion that we approve those? Second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 8.4 is to receive for possible action the awarding of a bid for installation, not insulation, installation of a gym floor at the Melissa Jones School. Again, was talked about in some detail in the Operations Committee meeting. Do you want to summarize that at all, Ms. Renner, in terms of where that was?
Sure. I don't have the page in front of me right now, but there were 2 bids received. This project is to replace the gym floor at Melissa Jones and also do some water, what's the term, mitigation, which is not in the nature of repairs of damage, but more of planning for the future and doing some work to prevent any problems from humidity or moisture, which would reduce the life of the new floor that's being installed. Thank you.
The current floor is lifting, and we believe it's a result of some moisture, and so we are correcting the problem and hopefully planning to avoid repeat problems moving forward.
We did have a concern in the subcommittee that the cost of this mitigation work, which was approximately $14,000 on the low bid, which is being recommended, we thought that $14,000 might be high relative to the cost of the entire floor, which is $44,000. But upon getting some more information from Mr. Burnham, we understood that doing this original work up front would extend the life of the floor, and it seemed to make sense. So there were 2 bids. The high bid combined with the replacement of the floor and the mitigation is $68,000 roughly, and the low bid is $57,000. And we've been asked to award the low bid. This is to a firm that has done work for the district before in a satisfactory manner. The low bidder is Chris Contractors of Freiburg, Maine. So we are asked to award a total of $57,104 to Chris Contractors.
And is that a motion?
That's a motion.
All right. Second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay. 8.5 is to act on a recommendation from the policy committee
Yes.
relating to the wellness
Yes.
policy and regulation.
So to avoid some confusion, we did vote on the student wellness, nutrition, and physical activity policy and regulation at last month's meeting. Unfortunately, this is a policy that has had many, many drafts and many, many sheets of paper. And we learned afterwards that while the drafts we received at the April and May meetings were the ones we were to vote on, there was a mix-up, and the ones we received and then acted on at the June meeting were an earlier draft. So apologies
Act
for
on the right
that.
policy.
And what we need to do now is please act on and putting forth a motion for policy 6800, student wellness, nutrition, and physical activity, that we adopt this draft of the policy.
Okay, so that's a motion?
That is a motion.
Okay, is there a second? All right. And this is on the policy and the regulation, is that the motion?
This is on the policy because I have a comment on the
Okay,
regulation, if
okay,
I may.
all right. Okay, any other questions about the policy, 6800?
If we wait another month to vote on it, would that mess anything up? Just knowing that we, read and voted on one version and now there's another one, I'm a little bit confused. I wouldn't mind taking another look at it. We had a concern last time about committing ourselves to following national school lunch guidelines or things like that. We wanted to be more general than that, and I just wouldn't mind reading it again if it's not going
We
to.
did make those changes based on your statement from the last time. So this is the policy that you guys received in April and in May. The guidelines that you mentioned were in the regulation, not in the policy itself, and we did eliminate those so that it would be more generic, and it just said state and federal and local guidelines, and we just left it at that. And so the adjustments that you recommended for the other one, we incorporated into this draft.
So what we have here tonight is the same thing that we were given back in April and May, and that...
Absolutely.
Correct, with the exception, or with the addition of Ms. Renner's recommendation
That's in the
on
regulation.
the school lunch meal planning. And basically, we took out everything around the National School Lunch Program and just said the school meals program will comply with federal, state, and local requirements, period.
Yes.
And that was the recommendation. And we also had a recommendation to remove a parenthetical statement.
Oh,
That was
yes,
in
right,
another
right,
part,
right.
and we
Yes.
removed that as well.
Yes,
So
okay.
this is the
Everything we
actual
discussed.
one that was
Yes.
received for 2 months, plus the changes that you recommended.
Got it.
All right?
Okay.
It would put us in a little bit of a crunch, because we've got to make sure that this is in place for the beginning of the school year. We do have a new person who is going to be chairing the Wellness Advisory, because with the retirement of Ms. Bishop, she was the chairperson of that committee. There is a deadline, August 1st, for principals to make a report to the Wellness Committee about the previous year's school, and then the Wellness Committee makes a report, I believe, by the end of August 30th or September 30th.
All right, then I'm comfortable.
So I really think it's timely, and we need to get this one going.
Are you okay?
Yes, yes.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and then 8.5.2 is the regulation.
That's exactly right. The same thing here. I did want to identify on the second page, 6800B, under beverages, the second bullet. The policy committee, we are suggesting the removal in this copy of the first 5 words, vending and non-vending sales of, because it actually is in contradiction to the last sentence.
Right.
And this was actually, quite frankly, something that
the policy committee didn't touch. It was in the old policy as well, and I think with 10 pages of document, this simply got missed. But with that alteration, I would like to make a motion that the student wellness, nutrition, and physical activity regulation be approved tonight.
Second.
Okay, any question? Yeah.
Just on the beverages thing, I seem to recall a few years ago there were like energy drinks in the schools, in the middle school. Is that correct? Is that something that's changed over the last few years?
We do not sell the energy drinks in the schools. No, absolutely not.
But did we at some point, like a few years ago?
Not to my knowledge,
Or more
unless it
sugary,
was-
because I seem to remember an article in the newspaper about it or something, but maybe I'm...
There was discussion around energy drinks last year when in a pilot at LEAT where we were disseminating nutritional information out to families, there was an item that suggested that energy drinks were never appropriate for elementary age students. That same document, not in Guilford schools, but in some other venues, was caught upon as being inflammatory, and there was talk about a lawsuit from the makers and vendors of energy drinks. One of our senators got involved. So there was some conversation about that, but it was about a statement that was made about energy drinks. We have never provided them in the schools, to my knowledge, or during my tenure. There was some time some time
Or even
ago.
sugary drinks, I don't know.
Yes, we sold juice drinks and sodas out of vending machines, and that has not been allowed in schools for a number of years now.
Okay.
There was a drink, the Switch, I think is
Yeah.
what you're referring to, and we haven't sold that in a couple of years.
Okay, so we did sell it a few years ago, but then we
Yeah,
changed.
it wasn't really an energy drink. I think it was supposed to be a fruit water carbonated
Right,
thing.
but I mean, the regulation talks not just about energy, but about no added sugars, right?
Correct.
Right.
These are new guidelines.
Right, and these came out by Connecticut when?
Maybe a year ago.
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to figure out the
Yeah.
evolution
I
of
don't
things
think we've
here.
had those in a couple of years, that Switch drink.
Right, okay.
All right, anything else? Motion's been made and seconded, I believe, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And then 8.6, this is just a receive item, is it not? On graduation
That is
requirements?
correct. Yep.
You want to just,
So this is an update of some language on the graduation requirements, specifically around capped testing. We're in a little bit of a, perhaps a rock and a hard place, maybe not that dramatic, in the sense that we do have still a class of students, the class of 2015, who have taken capped as their state test and will be needing that for graduation. The class following them, 2016, it is unclear what the state is going to require for them as a graduation requirement. So what we have done on this first page is really kind of identify and make some slight changes in the language to be quite that specific. We are expecting to be looking at this policy again and regulation literally next year, at the beginning of next year, not only as we learn more from the state, but also because we have been approached by the high school administration and will be expecting another presentation from them again about a request to increase credit units required. So this is a temporary but necessary change at this point so that our policy and regulation does in fact reflect what will happen with our incoming senior class.
So CAP's
And
taken
the
in
class afterwards.
grade 11 or 10?
I'm sorry?
When is CAP
10.
taken?
10.
It's grade
Taken
10.
in grade 10.
And then, so you have to pass it at that point in order to graduate 2 years later, or you have 2 years to
Yes.
make that up.
Do
So the
something
CAP was administered this year. We're expecting to administer it?
CAPT is administered every year to 10th graders in science only.
Okay.
In reading and in mathematics, it was administered last year to 10th graders last year, who are this year's 11th graders and who will be next year's seniors.
Right.
CAPT was in place about 5 years, so it had like a 5-year stability record. Before, it was actually put in as a regulation for a requirement, not the entire requirement for graduation, but to be considered as part of the graduation requirements. So we're not sure if what it's going to mean for graduation, if anything, as far as any post-capped assessment.
But this year, the students took science, math, and English for
No,
cap?
this year,
You
the
mean this
10th
last spring,
graders
yeah?
took only
science.
science.
Only science.
And then the field
Okay.
test of language arts and
Right.
mathematics was for 11th graders.
Yeah, so the
So
current-
this year's sophomores will take this coming year as required, the
Yeah,
actual
the smarter balance.
SBAC.
And then
In
this year,
math and
sophomores will, in addition to the juniors taking math and language arts, the 10th grade capped science is still in place. And that's per the federal ESEA waiver, and the waiver exemption that Connecticut received. So 10th graders will continue to do science for the time being. And 11th graders will be doing math and language arts. And we'll see how that affects graduation requirements, if at all.
The only other, I should comment, the only other change here is there is just a correction or a language correction on the last 2 pages of the regulation from proficient to proficiency, mostly grammatical cleanup.
Okay, so that's just a receive. There's no urgency on
Right.
that, obviously. We'll carry that over to the next month's meeting and take it up then. Item 9, unfinished business.
Could I just ask on the item 862, which is the second of those, they list the GPA points. There's level 1, level 2. There's also level 0. Is that right?
Yes, but there are the grades for those don't count towards your GPA.
Okay, so they don't count at all. And then the AP courses would be an additional 0.5 quality points above level 1.
Correct.
Above level
Yes.
1, correct.
I'm just wondering if it's worth clarifying that and maybe mentioning the 0 level for people who are,
Oh, right now?
well,
Yeah.
no, just,
Yeah.
We're receiving it. I mean, if there's,
Yeah, so,
It's
this was something that we actually approved, I think, last year. But yes, so this lists level 1 and level 2. I know I've seen, and I don't know if it's in the handbook or not, or
It
maybe,
is.
quite frankly, as a parent of a junior, saw it recently, a grid that included not only a table with level 1 and level 2, but above level 1 an honors row, and above that an AP row that literally identified an A plus in an AP class versus an
Right.
honors class versus. But that's correct. So there's a level 1 and level 2 grade equivalents are provided here. Each AP course that a child takes gains them an additional 0.5 to the grade in that class. Each honors class an additional 0.25. A number of courses are provided with the option of, or sometimes simply as, a level 0 course, which allows our students to experience a class, perhaps stretching them, challenging them without having to take a grade that counts towards the actual cumulative grade point average, though they will receive a grade in the class.
okay. I'm just wondering if it's worth clarifying that in the
No,
policy.
no.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so we'll carry that over and perhaps with some clarifications for next month. 9 is unfinished business. Anything we need to carry? Yeah.
Just regarding the agenda items, I think I asked this last time. We used to have communications on there.
Yeah, we haven't.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't notice that was
Fell off again.
off.
It's-
I
keeps
mean,
slipping
it was
off
not
that.
intentional. I
Yeah,
think
which
that
is
was just a
fine.
template that Ms. Fiandella was working on.
Yes.
And I will confess that I was not in the, I was outside the district, shall we say, when this agenda
I
was
did
being
mention
put
that at the
together.
last meeting.
Yeah, and new business, are we going to have that on the agenda or not?
No, I think we shouldn't. I've said this before, and I know we keep talking about
Which I'm
it.
fine.
I just don't think
I
it
just think we ought to have a
complies.
standard agenda that we're sticking to, because it seems like.
Yeah,
we
it just
keep-
doesn't comply with FOIA.
I think what's happened is the old format
Yeah,
slipped
no, I know,
in
it keeps,
last
coming
month
back.
and again
It
this
got
month,
carried over.
twice.
It's copy-paste errors.
So under unfinished business, could I just, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115 related communication that may merge into a question a little bit, which is I continue to get some communications about the middle school mathematics. And I was just wondering if you could update, me personally also as a parent of a middle school child about sort of the assessment for Algebra 1 and how that was done, or how many kids took it, or what's happening with the communication of that, because I just have had some communications about that, and I'm confused myself, and I'm just wondering if you could clarify that.
At the end of the school year, students who were in the 6th grade and were either in the advanced grouping or were recommended by their teachers were assessed in a multiple of ways for algebra readiness. They took the Iowa Algebra Readiness Assessment. Students who performed well on that were also given the end of the year 7th grade assessment. There were a very limited number of students who essentially tested out of 7th grade instruction. They had mastered 70% or more of the 7th grade content. A single student, I believe. That student, in collaboration with her parents, has been recommended for placement in the 8th grade algebra setting. Should she and her parents accept that invitation, essentially, she will skip 7th grade instruction and will be placed directly into 8th grade algebra instruction. The next cohort of students, a significant number of students, had mastered approximately 50% of the 7th grade instruction. Those students are being recommended for the compacted 7th and 8th grade class, but not for the algebra class. For those students to skip over the 7th grade instruction completely would leave more than 50% of the concepts uncovered. They would develop gaps. They need exposure to those. There were some other students who performed at lower levels, and so from Adams, incoming 7th grade students are receiving a placement letter, and they are being placed in 7th grade math, compacted 7th and 8th grade math, which places those students on a trajectory to complete high school algebra as an 8th grader, or for one individual student, placement in the 8th grade algebra class at this time. Those communications are going out individually from Mrs. Walker to the individual families of those students. Moving forward, this is a screen that we intend to continue to keep in place at that 6th grade level to make sure that students who are ready and have essentially all of the knowledge, skills, and mastery of the work in the 7th grade have that opportunity to be able to take 8th grade algebra.
Now, if I were the parent of an incoming 5th grader and trying to figure out what was going to happen with math, because math just seems to be an area where they are getting placed and it has impacts down the line for high school, how would I understand what the district is doing in terms of what I could expect for assessments or placement? Or
that is a communication that I will expect Mr. Hamill to work with his math teachers and to make sure that we get out proactively. The conversation this year took place with a number of 6th grade parents who came in saying, we're in the first year of the new curriculum, how are we going to monitor this? And we discussed their concerns, talked about the assessments, and had those assessments collected and designed this year. Next year, we will make sure that Mr. Hamill has those communications out to his math teachers and through him and his math teachers to the parents of the students at Baldwin, so that everybody understands how we're going to continue to move students forward as we progress forward with the new math curriculum and the new math progression moving from 6th grade through 12th grade.
Also, this is kind of a different year because we didn't have a state assessment, or we didn't have a lot of the data that we typically use. So all the 6th grade students took a fact fluency test. In addition to, we looked at their 5th grade CMT scores, and then we added, and then the Iowa Algebra Readiness Test, and then we added this other piece to see, is the curriculum rigorous enough to support these students, or are they already know this curriculum?
But they were being tested on things that they'd never been taught.
Correct.
Exactly.
But it's because we didn't want them to skip the things that they hadn't been
Right.
taught.
But there was never any communication that what would be covered in the test. Let's say that there's a kid who conceptually has the ability to master this material, but has never been exposed to it, but the parents would like to expose them to it so that they can place into algebra, for example. how would a parent know that?
Moving forward, Mr. Hamill is going to make those communications so that parents understand this is exactly the process that was used 5 or 6 years ago when students first began skipping pre-algebra and being placed into the algebra. And what we saw at that time is it started with a very small number of students and over years progressed to whole classes of algebra happening.
So there were classes of kids at that time that were conceptually able to do the
Well,
algebra.
In the old curriculum, yes.
Yeah, was not nearly as rigorous, but this is a transition year because we don't have the data. Beginning this coming school year, we're going to have interim assessments. We're going to have a summative assessment that we will have results from immediately. So we're going to have a whole lot more data points based on the new standards and our new curriculum, which is aligned to the standards. So I think we're going to have a lot. We had to have something, though, for this year as a transition year. And so we developed an assessment based on the major claim, a procedural claim of the Smarter Balanced assessments, and put it together and gave it to those students who really topped out of the pre-algebra kind of piece. To see if they were ready to skip 7th grade, or if they were capable of a compacted class.
And I would just note that I would assume that this is going to be part of what the High Achieving Learners study is going to be looking at.
Exactly the sort of thing that Dr. Warner